damp, hungry, confused. These 3 words describe my condition on July of 2014 in Denver, Colorado. I was going into my freshman year of high school when my youth group decided to take part in this poverty simulation. It felt like we were homeless, but in reality, it was just a controlled experience. It was meant to illustrate homelessness, but it wasn't the real deal. So for 3 days, we scoured for food in city dumpsters, we slept in playgrounds through the cold and rainy nights, and we endured long lines at soup kitchens and homeless shelters. We basically encountered all the problems that a homeless person would face. At the time, I thought to myself, this sucks. But looking back as a sophomore in college with all the food that I can eat in the cafeteria 3 times a day and a warm bed to sleep on in Yoder Hall, I think to myself, maybe I needed that. Like many of you sitting in the audience, I will never experience true poverty. I won't know what it's like to wonder when or where my next meal will be. I won't ever question if I have a bed to sleep on. I'll pick clothes from a closet full of options. So why am I speaking about the homeless? Because on this night, and every night, Goshen is home to the homeless. Global homelessness exists in the world we live in today. At times, we're drawn to this issue in developing countries, but refuse to recognize it directly under our noses. You see, the American dream is being sought out by immigrants and refugees from all over, but what about the homeless in the United States? The homeless in Elkhart County? What about the homeless in Goshen? You see, homeless America defies easy characterization. Persecution of the lower class and those who aren't suitable for the system seem to be rooted in the issue of homelessness. Now, how is it that the victims of the problem are the ones that fall prey? It's truly time to reassess ourselves. Are we really fighting a war on homelessness? Or are we fighting a war against the homeless? The existence of homeless people in our world is still evident today. You see it on the news, but many don't see it from a realistic point of view. Being from Bangladesh, I've seen it all. Beggars with no legs, asking for spare change, mothers with children trying to make ends meet, teenagers selling stolen goods just to make a profit for something to eat for the day. It truly breaks my heart to see my own people suffering and in agonizing conditions. Researchers say that despite the poverty level dropping, 68% of Bangladeshi citizens have been homeless for more than a year. That means over 100 million people have been without a place to call home, whether it was due to poverty, natural disasters, or violence. And you might think it doesn't affect you because it's on the other side of the world, but what about here today? What about in the United States, the land of the free, the home of the brave? In our own city, there are victims of the system who face homelessness. In June of 2019, Goshen leaders began evicting homeless encampment near the Millrace Trail. Think about that. Not even a mile away from campus, people just like you and I were facing homelessness. As a result of the eviction, Mayor Jeremy Stutzman and others began working with the community agencies to provide a shelter for the homeless being evicted. Ross Swihart, the executive director of Faith Mission in Elkhart, is working to find solutions to this issue. Swihart says, quote, "We are interested in finding solutions for the people that are living out there because it is not a way to live. It is not a way to live," end quote. Swihart says that Faith Mission is partnering with the Interfaith Hospitality Network to create a shelter hopefully in the next few years. However, the problem is now. It's still here. Everywhere you look around our cities, parks, and streets, it's likely you'll witness a homeless person struggling to survive. People today are far too driven by work or money to really see the problem of homelessness surrounding them. Those who are discriminated against are the victims of poverty. According to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, 40% of the homeless community is made up of African Americans. Furthermore, they discovered that over 700,000 youth under the age of 18 experience homelessness each year. The numbers are staggering, but we can see that societal and generational homelessness is an attack on the lower class, the people who aren't considered top tier in a pessimistic society. And let's face it, for the most part, you and I will never truly experience homelessness from a realistic perspective. However, one can see the effects of homelessness and poverty in their daily lives. To better understand the challenge we face, I'd like to return to Denver, reflecting on what I learned from my 3 days of poverty immersion. Our group leader, Jeff Cook, was an executive director for Providence Center for Urban Leadership, an organization that helps families in poverty and equips them for ministry. Now, Jeff was telling us a story of this homeless woman who was very hungry. And now, as this homeless woman was scouring for food, this Christian man approached her and saw that she was hungry and that she was sleep deprived and that she was starving. So the Christian man goes up to her and hands her this pamphlet saying, "Jesus will save you." After hearing this, I was really confused. I mean, what was the woman supposed to do? Eat the paper? I mean, is this an evangelism thing? Did he feel good about giving this starving woman a gospel tract? Jeff went on to explain that by prioritizing our own agenda, we're not helping the homeless. We're not doing the right thing when the outcome doesn't go both ways. Following this event, we found ourselves in a situation where we could actually do some good. Our group explored the city of Denver, doing all the touristy things that youth groups do, and we ended up in an outlet mall within the heart of the city. Immediately, every group member noticed the homeless scattered across this outlet mall, something that we wouldn't have recognized before. Rather than finding some loose change in our back pockets, several group members searched for food and water to provide for the homeless. And I thought this is what we had to do. However, looking back, we were merely scratching the surface. You see, when it comes to the homeless, we are going beyond materialism. We are called to give to the homeless, yes, but we are also called to build relationships with them in order to truly show that we care. This entire experience opened my eyes to this world that many overlook. The world where you're one or two bad circumstances away from living on the streets. A world where you have nowhere to go, nowhere to stay. Where can one find peace in a world that has very little of it? Oftentimes, our own personal agenda reigns supreme in our lives. We think about ourselves because self-care is important, right? It's all about me. But what about them? What about the outsiders, the outcasts? If we want to create peace with one another, we must first find peace with ourselves. Peace starts with us. So what can we do? For starters, we should determine a way to educate ourselves around this issue. There are many ways a person becomes homeless, whether it's due to lack of affordable housing, loss of job, substance abuse, illness, divorce, and many others. One step in figuring out the complex issue of homelessness is finding how they got there in the first place. Secondly, we are called to respect the homeless. Those who are homeless are still human. They still feel emotions just like you and I. Many people who experience homelessness say that the loss of dignity is harder to bear than the loss of physical things. We may be conflicted when it comes to what exactly we have to do when we encounter a homeless person. And although there isn't a specific answer, we are called to build a relationship with them, which is perceived more significantly than a couple bucks out of our pocket. Respecting those who are homeless is just as important as respecting those who aren't. Lastly, we are called to recognize the importance of advocating for the homeless, calling your local business, calling your local homeless shelter, helping your local organizations with food drives, and following local politics in order to see what you can do to help are all examples. You might call the window in downtown Goshen to get more specific information about volunteering. You might call St. Mark's Methodist Church in North Goshen to see what services are offered for the homeless. The outlets are available to help, but it's up to you to make the change that you want to see. At the end of the day, we are all human. Our common goal is to move forward. Rather than creating dissonance with one another, we should strive to choose compassion over ignorance. And we may not solve this issue immediately, but taking that one step could be the way to figure out the solution. Thank you.